Welcome to this FireDAC Skill Sprint, BDE to InterBase Migration using FireDAC. I'm David I, Vice President of Developer Relations and Chief Evangelist here at Embarcadero. Here's my email address, my Twitter handle, and my blog on the Embarcadero community site. Skill Sprints are very quick tips and tricks on a specific topic, in this case, in the FireDAC series. FireDAC is the multi-device data access library that comes with RAD Studio, Delphi, and C++ Builder XE7. One thing you can do with FireDAC is you can talk to SQL databases. You can also use an ODBC connection to talk to ODBC data sources. And there is also information on the FireDAC doc wiki about how you can migrate your database engine legacy applications to use FireDAC to talk to InterBase databases and other databases. And the FireDAC architecture provides a couple ways to do this. One is by having direct connection to SQL databases. You can also go through the bridge driver through ODBC, and if you have an ODBC driver for an existing database, for example, a Paradox or DBase table, or some other database, you can get to and use FireDAC's powerful architecture to work with those databases in place. One choice you have in moving to FireDAC, where you may want to keep your legacy Paradox and DBase tables intact, is you can use FireDAC with its ODBC bridge. First thing you do is create the ODBC connection using the Microsoft Windows control panel. Then in your Delphi and C++ Builder apps, drop a TFD connection component, choose the ODBC connection name as your data source. Then drop a TFD table component and set the table name property to the Paradox or DBase database table that you want to use. And there's information about this in the FireDAC doc wiki. Let's take a quick look at how you would set up to use FireDACs to talk with a Paradox table via ODBC. So the first thing you'll do is you'll go to your control panel in Windows. Under Administrative Tools, there are two applets. One, set up ODBC data sources for 32-bit Windows, and then set up ODBC data sources for 64-bit Windows. I'm going to build a 32-bit app, so I'll go in and set the data source administrator for 32-bit, and I've got a Paradox test data source name that I've set up, and I've configured it to work with Paradox 5.x. I've selected the directory to point to the samples table that comes with XE7, and in that samples data folder there are a bunch of DBase and Paradox tables. Then in the IDE I've got a sample project. The TFD connection component is there. I'll right mouse click, bring up the connection editor. You'll see that I've chosen the connection definition name to be that Paradox ODBC, and I've set the data source property to the Paradox text ODBC data source name. And I can test to make sure that works. And it says that it can connect to those underlying databases, and I've got a connection now to Paradox ODBC. Next, I'll connect the FD connection. I'll drop down a FD table component. And under here, I can choose the table name property, and I can set that to the name of my Paradox table. In this case, the BioLife. We can also use the pull down to select other tables that are available. Once that table is selected, it knows that the species number is the index, so the index field name gets set for me. And I can activate the table. And then I've used the Live Bindings wizard to set a string grid. So when I activate the table, I can see the data live at design time. So that's how I can use FireDAC through ODBC and keep my Paradox or DBase tables when I'm building my applications. Let's say you want to get off of Paradox or DBase and you want to move to a SQL database. In our case, InterBase fits very nicely in that migration scheme because it's an easily deployed, easily embeddable database that can run on Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, and Linux platforms. There are several different editions. There's the developer edition, which comes with RAD Studio, Delphi, and C++ Builder, so you can do your development. There's a desktop version of InterBase for deploying desktop applications to your users. There's the server that runs on several different platforms. There's also InterBase To Go, which is an embeddable either static library or dynamic library as part of your application, which gives you the full InterBase server support. And there's IBB Lite, which is a small footprint, free and easy to deploy version of InterBase that you can use across all the Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android platforms. IBB Lite is free. It has a limit of 100 megabytes, but for small Paradox and DBase table installations, it's a great fit. It's available, again, on the Windows, OS X, iOS, and Android platforms for your applications that you might want to move from Windows to other platforms. It's binary compatible at a database on all platforms and with all the editions of InterBase. And just by changing the registration key, you can directly upgrade it to the full power of InterBase with InterBase To Go, with full encryption support and no limit on the database size. So over here on the InterBase page, you'll see the different product editions: IBB Lite, InterBase To Go, InterBase Desktop, and InterBase Server, and all of the different capabilities that each one of those has, as far as number of CPUs, number of simultaneous users, encryption, strong encryption support, database file size, and so on. As far as moving an application and moving your Paradox or DBase table into InterBase, on the FireDAC page, there's a Migrate the BDE to FireDAC set of steps. There are pages for that. I have the links down below that'll take you through taking the existing source code, your existing forms in Delphi, and running the refined utility, which is a Perl regular expression search and replace utility, and there's a script for migrating BDE that will convert the forms and the source code for Delphi into use FireDAC, whether it's in data modules, on your forms, and in your source code for database connectivity. Now, the BDE is still available via separate registered user download. You'll need to install the BDE, and in the IDE, if you want to do design time, you'll need to install the components. Once you've migrated over to FireDAC, you don't need the BDE anymore. The only other part of the work is to migrate your Paradox or DBase data into InterBase, whether it's InterBase Lite, free distributable on Windows and other platforms, or into another edition of InterBase. What's great is the people at Clever Components have an InterBase data pump, and it'll take any ADO, BDE, or InterBase data source and database, and it'll migrate it to a target InterBase database. And it's a free download. I've got the URL there. And over on the Clever Components page, you'll see the InterBase Data Pump landing page where you can see the steps, and there's a download link at the bottom. Here's what the InterBase Data Pump looks like. There's 3 steps to the process. The first step is to choose the source. So, for example, it might be a BDE source, and then you can navigate to the databases. So, for example, I've got my Paradox test. And then once we've chosen the BDE source, I can also go down and set the destination database. So, for example, it might be InterBase GDB, or it might be an InterBase 7 IB file. And then you navigate to that IB file. Step 2 is to match up the data sources, and step 3 is to do the pump. So once we've migrated the data, we're ready to start the BDE to FireDAC migration of your forms and source code. So let's take a look at what's available with FireDAC for doing the migration and the scripts that are available for converting a BDE-based Paradox application into an InterBase application. For BDE migration, there's a DocWiki entry for looking at that. I've got that loaded over here. It just takes you through all sorts of steps, taking your high-level alias for BDE and migrating it to a FireDAC connection. The high-level types and data types and field types have component counterparts and field counterparts in FireDAC. And there's a whole step-by-step process. And again, there's all the steps involved and some hints along the way as well. There's a batch file that's included in the samples under, it's under Samples, Object Pascal Database, FireDAC Tool Refined, BDE to FD Migration demo. There's a batch file in here. And in Refined, there's for BDE migration, there's this migration script. So the batch file here just says delete a subdirectory, which is going to be the FireDAC version of this sample app. It's the master detail Marine Adventures app that we've been shipping forever. It'll convert the source files and the DFM file using this script. What does the script look like? Well, it's a bunch of commands for the refined utility to transfer and convert the names of components and source code to the FireDAC version. So T-trans isolation is converted to an option in FireDAC and so on. It'll convert T database. So database name is connection name, alias name is connection definition name. So these are all the migration things that'll take place. A T database goes to a TFD connection, a T session to TFD manager, T table to FT table, T query, and so on to TFD query. Here's my IDE with this marine adventure sample with got a data module with a database component and a bunch of T table components and query components. You know, this is all the BDE stuff. And then we go and we can run that migration script, that batch file over here. Let's just go and run that. Here's the demo source code with all the DFMs. The batch file is down here in the middle somewhere. Here it is right here. So let's just run that. It's running the migration script. And then finally over on, we have the DFMs with FireDAC in it. So let's just say open project. Let's go to the FireDAC Mast app, open this one. And now we've got the same application user interface. And again, in the data module, we've got an FD connection component. We've got a TFD table, TFD query, FD queries, and so on. So that's how easy it is to take your forms and your source code and convert it into a FireDAC application. So to summarize, you have a couple choices. You can use FireDAC and the ODBC bridge to get to your Paradox and DBase tables and build your applications with FireDAC. You can migrate your Paradox and DBase data that you were using with the BDE to InterBase using something like the Clever Components InterBase Data Pump, or you can write your own applications if you install the BDE to read those tables and write the data out to InterBase. And then using the refined utility and the batch file that comes with FireDAC, you can migrate your source code and your BDE-based form files, including data modules, to use FireDAC. Point the FireDAC now at the InterBase database data source, and you have your application moved off the BDE and using FireDAC. Just want to remind you of the special offers that we have available for just a few more days, 5 more days, till the end of March 2015. If you buy XE7, you'll get the next major release for free. You can also get upgrade pricing on older versions of Delphi C++ Builder and Rad Studio if you upgrade to XE7 and add the update subscription. When you buy XE7, you can also then get your choice of an additional Embarcadero product of equal or lesser value. If you purchase or upgrade to the Enterprise and above editions, we'll give you 10 user EMS licenses for free deployment. And you also get the free bonus pack, which comes with custom styles, Marco Cantu's Object Pascal book, the Meta converter, with the bonus pack worth over $700. And you can find out all the details and terms and conditions on the RAD offer page. And now it's time for Q&A. And during the Q&A, I'll put up the resource links for all of the different parts of this skill sprint. Those resource links are also on my blog. So if you go to the community.embarcadero.com David I blog, Sip from the Fire Hose, you'll find those links and you can click them. I'll also put the links in the chat window during the Q&A so that you can grab them and click on them from there. Alf is asking, is IBB Lite the only platform that is embeddable for free? From us, for InterBase, yes, IBB Lite is that embeddable database, full ANSI SQL 92, one transaction, one user active at a time. And it is available for Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. And of course, if you decide to go the ODBC route, then you're tied to Windows only. But by migrating older DBase, Paradox tables in BDE apps to IBB Lite, for example, then you could move applications to other platforms using FireMonkey. But if you have your VCL BDE app, you can move it to a SQL database like IBB Lite. And if you're only on Windows in the case of VCL, then you can do your testing with InterBase Developer. Let's see, Roger's saying, presumably you could also migrate the database table by using a custom app based on FireDAC. With the ODBC bridge, yes, you could have FireDAC ODBC read the Paradox or DBase files and then create the SQL table and copy over the data. So you could do it that, and you never would have to install the BDE. But the BDE is a separate install. It's in the register user download area if you need it. And there's a support article. I have the link for how you, once you've installed the BDE, how you install the packages to get the BDE components in the IDE. Let's see, are there some web resources showing the limitations of IBB Lite? Yeah, I put that page up, and it's the link on the InterBase Product Editions page. If you just go to InterBase and go to the bottom of the InterBase homepage, or if you look in the chat window, the link is there to get to the Product Editions page. It gives you a columnar view, which I showed, for all of the different editions of InterBase. The only one that has a size limitation is IBB Lite. All the other editions of InterBase are unlimited size. Will IBX, that's InterBase Express components, remain? Yes, we have IBX, and we're continuing that. IBX is part of the install. And so the IBX components we continue to include because they have a wider range of InterBase-specific functionality for APIs, for management monitoring, and other things. So yeah, InterBase Express is still in our builds and our installs. Let's see, when migrating from BDE to FireDAC, is it necessary to remove spaces from field names? The conversion tools, for example, the data pump, it will convert the spaces underscore. In your code, the spaces are squeezed out as it relates to field names versus column names in the database. So it's your choice whether, if you write your own migration tools, if you write your own code, then you might have to do something. If you're reading the field names from Paradox, for example, and you see a space, and you're formulating your own create table using the metadata, then you'll have to think about that. But otherwise, in the migration tool, for example, from Clever Components, it takes care of that. And inside the ID, when you connect to a Paradox database, the field name gets the right valid syntax, which is removing the space. Okay, Gregor's saying, in the future, have in mind the possibility of accessing GIS with FireDAC. Okay, there are other databases. Think about what I usually tell people. If we don't support a database directly, look to see if there's an ODBC driver on Windows for a database. And if there's an ODBC driver for that database, you can use the ODBC bridge with FireDAC to get to it. Let's see, Sean is saying, does FireDAC ODBC Paradox conversion work as efficiently as BDE Paradox? For example, scrolling, querying. I haven't done any tests. That ODBC driver is not our ODBC driver. That's from Microsoft. I would expect it's probably slower. How long have we got before the BDE goes completely? I don't know. We've made the BDE a separate install. I guess I'll have to ask R&D whether they'll continue to build the BDE packages and the separate install. But the sign of first we deprecated the SQL links many years ago for BDE. I don't know, 15 years ago? I'm not sure how long. Now taking BDE out of the install, that's your next sign. But I don't really have a date. We do have a separate install for BDE, so it's still there for now. Oh, use ASA versions 9, 11, and 16. You should go to the FireDAC page. Let me look that up. I gave you the link to the FireDAC doc wiki. So if we go to the FireDAC.wiki and look, let's see, there is a page for working with different databases. So if we look at database connectivity, so you should take a look, Tim, at I'm putting the link in the Q&A log for the databases that are supported separate from ODBC or via DB Express. You can take a look at the FireDAC.wiki as it relates to different databases, because we don't necessarily control all of the availability of different databases from external vendors. I think for Advantage, you need to talk with SAP. SAP owns all the Advantage database things now. So you should check with SAP's websites and maybe contacts you can have. Let's see. Maurizio has a comment. When we talk about there's no driver required for FireDAC, we're talking about as it relates to the BDE and DB Express, they had additional DLLs that you had to worry about and deploy for those drivers. In the case of FireDAC, everything is linked in. You'll still need a driver that Oracle provides, or Microsoft provides, or MySQL provides, and so on. With FireDAC, all that it needs is linked into your application. You still need the DB vendor, like MSSQL or MSSQL Client DLL, something like that. But those are installed not by us. Those are installed when you install Oracle Client, Microsoft Client, MySQL, and so on your things. Sean is asking, is there IB objects to FireDAC migration path? We don't make IB objects, so we don't have any current plans. Antonio is asking, what is better to use if we have an InterBase database? Should we use FireDAC or the IBX component? It depends on what you want to do with InterBase. If you want the full range of InterBase API support, then use InterBase Express. If you want a more general and you want to talk to additional other databases, then use FireDAC, because it gives you one set of components to talk to all the databases FireDAC supports, versus IBX is specific for InterBase. We're continuing to add more specific functionality to FireDAC through different options, like change views. For example, you saw in Stephen Ball's preview developer skill sprint on March 3rd, I think it was, where you can use FireDAC to now work with change views in InterBase XE7. Again, if you look at InterBase Express or IBX, it has additional component wrappers for additional special InterBase APIs. So it really that depends whether you're InterBase only. And IBX is available on all 4 platforms that Delphi and C++ Builder work on. There's a question Thomas was asking, what is the most direct common way to migrate a BDE Boolean field to InterBase? InterBase has I guess you could create a domain and with a Boolean kind of character, Boolean integer type, and then use that domain name. It looks like most people will create a domain in the database, a domain name that uses, call it Boolean, Boolean something, and store that use either a small int or maybe a char column type, and you could map a Boolean value, true, false, to for example, to T or F. Yeah, there is an InterBase Boolean type, but what some people do again is they create a domain Let's see, Sujus is asking, is there a utility to convert DB Express to FireDAC? We don't have one. I think it's a good suggestion for a skill sprint. It's a lot easier in DB Express in the sense that you can do a replacement of the DB Express SQL connection component to TFT connection. T-SQL query to TFT query, T-SQL table to TFT table. Since FireDAC has an option for cached updates or automatic updates, the only difference, DB Express, everything was read-only, and then you did apply updates with the client data set, for example. I mean, the output then of a TFT query or TFT table it is a data set, so you could pipe that into a client data set and leave the rest of that code the same, or you could use FireDAC's FDMEM table. There's a few option settings you might have to choose again if you want cached updates on or off. They're on by default, but you could turn it off and then do your apply updates if you're using DB Express, maybe in a data snap server or in some other architecture. Okay, well, everyone, thank you so much for being with us, not only today, but throughout the quarter. The skill sprint are on the landing page. The YouTube replays, except for the two this week, the Box 2D preview from Tuesday in the Brad Studio Skill Sprint and this FireDAC Skill Sprint. Otherwise, they're all caught up as far as the replays. There's the playlists, so you can go there and click and watch any of the replays if you happen to miss any one or more of the developer skill sprints and FireDAC skill sprints. So we'll see you all again. Thanks a lot for being with us, and have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world, and we'll see you online real soon now.